Okay, in terms of the stuff, it's always mostly bad news. Deadline same has been all along. Exam 1, quizzes part 1. Deadline 5, Friday, October 16th. Exam 2, quizzes part 3. Deadline November 13th. Exam 3, exam 4, quizzes part 4. Deadline 5, December 4th. These are all end of day, 11:59 p.m. And exam number 5, deadlines December 11th at noon. For the paper, deadlines for the draft are November 16th, plus 5 bonus November 18th. Full credit November 25th, and half December 4th. And of course, because of homecoming stuff, this Friday, October 16th, no class stuff. Before going on to finish up our good dead friend Immanuel Kant, and then heading to our final adventures in relativism, anything about the previous stuff or stuff to be that needs more stuff? Okay, so last time looking at the start of our good dead friend Immanuel Kant, and I mentioned that he divides reason into two categories. Now normally we think of like theoretical reason, we think about like theoretical stuff. And practical reason, we think about like practical stuff. Like I used to say being able to program a VCR, but no one does that now. I guess it would be like setting up your smartphone or being able to change your product. But Kant means this. Theoretical reason for him is what we consider, say, scientific stuff, dealing with the outside physical world. And practical reason for him is essentially what we call ethics, dealing with morality. And so Kant, interestingly, boringly enough, makes a claim that these are two separate things, but then later says they're essentially one and the same. The gist of this, though, for Kant, he believes reality is run by laws. Some of them are the physical laws, and some are moral laws. Now, Kant wrote a lot of words for ethics. There is, of course, the critique of practical reason and his other works on ethics. He put an emphasis on things like duty and rationality, and one of the things that he's known for is what is regarded as a Copernican Revolution in ethics. As you might recall from history of science stuff, Copernicus is the dude credited with going from the geocentric view, that the Earth is the center of everything and all revolves around us, to the heliocentric view, the idea that the sun is the center of the solar system and stuff revolves around the sun, reversing the solar system. And what Kant did in his Copernican Revolution is this. As you might recall, when we were talking about our good dead friend Aristotle, his view was we could look at the world, badly drawn world, and we could see the way the world is, and draw from that how things ought to be. That is to say, our morality is pulled from the world. Like we saw the example of Aquinas, we note that if we try to kill things, they try to escape and survive, or if they're especially polite, they try to kill us right back. And so from that, Aquinas infers that what is good is to not kill, not commit suicide, and survive. Now, a later philosopher, who we're not going to look at, our good dead friend David Hume, said you can't get a ought from it is. And Kant said, yeah, that sounds right. So what he does is he reverses it. Instead of us getting our ethics from observing the world out there, his idea is that ethics is inside us. Kind of like in Kung Fu Panda, the secret ingredient is you. Or there is no secret ingredient. But this idea is we have the ethics inside our minds, and it's not out there, but what we do is, very crudely put, is we kind of project it on the world. To use my usual crack analogy, the image on the screen is not on the screen, it's being projected by the projector. So this would be like the image on the computer is like our moral stuff, the world is like the screen, and we're projecting it onto it. Now, a very good question might be, when I mentioned, back in the ancient days of the first week, I said Kant is an example of a moral absolutist. But how can that be if he thinks morality just lives in your head? Well, here's a crappy analogy to kind of illustrate it. Color, at least according to scientists, just exists in our minds. It's not out there, it's in here. But, what color is the folder?
I'm really colorblind.
See, one exception. Yeah, in general, we think it's blue. We do have the issue of color blindness, in which case it's some kind of color. But in general, color we know is in our head, as shown by the example of color blindness. It's in here, not up here. But we, in general, see color the same way. And for Kant, morality works in a very similar way. Morality is in your head, but according to Kant, we all have the same basic rationality. So the same thing is in everybody's head, so to speak. So he's able to be an objectivist, because even though it's not out in the world, it is really for real in our minds. Or so he goes. Now, this is but a thin slice of Kant's really, really, really big book on ethics. But here are some of the key points about his core moral view. Kant accepts the notion of the goodwill. And goodwill is not like a place where you go if you want to get a budget-priced Halloween costume or drop off that old sofa that's really awful. It's literally the will that is good. Now, what Kant does here is essentially criticize opposing moral theories. Because if you're going to use a crappy analogy, if you're going to sell a product, one thing you want to do, of course, is show how your product is good, but you also want to show how the competition is defective. Be that product a laptop, a camera, political candidate, or whatever. Now, we saw in our good dead friend John Stuart Mill the idea that you assess morality based on consequences. You take an action, and you'd say, well, how much happiness will this create for morally relevant beings, and how much unhappiness? And it's more happy than unhappy, good. The reverse is true, bad. Now, Kant brings up an interesting, or perhaps boring point, namely that his view is, to even be worthy of happiness, a being has to have a good will. Why? Well, he claims that an impartial, rational observer would be displeased by a non-goodwill being happy. So he thinks that it's not just a matter of how much happiness is created, there's also the important question of being worthy, like in Wayne's World, of happiness. Now what about virtue theory? Now Kant, of course, like pretty much all moral thinkers, is not going to bash the virtues and say, virtue is bad. But what he does here is this. He essentially steals an argument from Plato about the importance of the unity of the virtues. And Plato's argument was that if you have some of the virtues, but not the complete package, you could be really, really, really bad. That having some of them and not all of them is more dangerous than having none of them. And Kant makes a similar argument. How so? Well, this is what he claims. He asks us to consider someone with many virtues, but lacking the goodwill. So they don't will the good, they will the bad. And his claim is those normally positive qualities make the person more dangerous. To illustrate, suppose you have someone who is intelligent, charming, has a reasonable degree of courage, is capable of planning, and has pretty good impulse control. Now, what would be a good hobby or occupation for this person? One possibility might be serial killer. Why? Well, serial killers have to be good impulse control. Anybody can be a mass murderer, horrifying, so you just go and kill a lot of people. But serial killer requires patience, planning, etc. And many of the serial killers we've caught have been very charming, reasonably intelligent people. And so some of those qualities would be far more dangerous. You think about, to use another crappy analogy, think of cartoon villains, like in old cartoons like the Smurfs. You had I think it was Gargamel or something. And of course the classic cartoon villains, they always have stupid plans, because they're evil and stupid. So they're always easily defeated. Or think of Scooby-Doo. The villain is always dumb, because they're defeated by a dog and a stoner who's pretty super hot, but still manages to win. And if a stoner and a dog are beating you, you're losing in villainy. Then compare them to, sort of classic movie villains like Darth Vader. Darth Vader in the original Star Wars movies is impressive because even though he's evil, he has many virtues. He's intelligent, he's strong, he's capable, he's got force powers, he's good at motivating his underlings, and so he has many fine and wonderful qualities, except for that evil. So Kant seems right. A person who has many fine qualities, courage, intelligence, etc., is all the more dangerous if their will is bad. And again, think classic movie villains that are particularly dangerous. In fictional stuff, the Joker, Lex Luthor, General Zod, Razagul, those are all people of extraordinary, fictional people of extraordinary qualities who are bad. So Kant seems, kind of right. Next he turns to laying out his actual moral view. Now he claims that the moral worth of an action is not based on consequences. Why not? Well, for Kant, morality is all about rationality and reason. And he thinks that happiness or unhappiness could be brought about by perhaps pure chance. For example, suppose after class you're walking into your car and you're one of the gravel parking lots. And there's like an area that's been eroded away, and you slip, and you fall, and then, I've fallen, I can't get up. But then you stand up and you find, under one of the rocks, a diamond as big as your hand. Now in that case, your happiness level probably went up, because now you're a big diamond. But of course, that was just pure chance, and you would not consider that like moral. I mean, you'd say, well, this is good, but you really wouldn't mean morally good, but even though you're happy. And Kant would say that if there's not the will of a rational being involved, it's not, moral. So how do we figure out how to determine the good? Well, Kant's model is based on the notion of law. He's a deontologist. Following the correct law is good, breaking it is bad. As would be breaking bad. That would be bad. So here's his method in an illustration. Now, Kant asks us to imagine the following scenario, and we'll use it to illustrate his method of determining the good. And it's an easy scenario to imagine. Imagine you get a person, we'll call him, say, Donald. And Donald's really short on money. And the only place to get the money is the bank. But he knows he can't pay it back ever. So if you go to the bank and you say, hey, can you give me some money that I can never pay back? What will the bank say? They'll say, what do you think you are? We are the government. And so the bank won't give you the money. Now, so the only way you can get the money, if you can't pay it back, is to lie and say, sure, I'll pay you back, no problem. And Kant's question is, how do we tell whether that would be moral or not? Now, Kant says there are actually two questions here, one moral, one not. One is the matter of, would it be a smart idea? Would it be prudential, a smart thing to do? And Kant thinks, when you're talking about being prudent, smart or dumb, that's a matter of consequences. In that case, you ask the question, would this be a smart thing to do, means figuring out things like, what is my chance of getting away with it? What is my chance of not getting away with it? If I don't get away with it, what are the consequences? If I get away with it, what are the positive consequences? And Kant thinks that that's not a moral choice. That's just being practical. Do I get away with it? Do I not? What's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? How does the moral test work for him? Well, for him, here's the test. The question is not, what are the consequences, but would it be the right thing to do? And here's how he thinks we should test it. The first part of the test is this. You're in a scenario where you wonder, what should I do? Will this be good or will this be bad? And you're not concerned about, the prudence of the matter, the practical stuff like, will this make me a lot of money, get me in trouble or what? You're concerned about right and wrong. And so step two would be this. Kant says you need to create a maxim. not the magazine for men, but a maxim in this case is like a rule. To be more specific, it's self-interested, it's aimed at your benefit, it's self-given, you give yourself the permission, and it's permission to take an action. So you say to yourself, I give myself permission to do this because it will benefit me, it's in my self-interest. So in this case, my maxim would be, when I need money, and I know I can't pay it back, I will lie to get it. The next step, step 3, is this. I'm supposed to rationally consider whether or not I can will my maxim, my personal permission, to be a universal law. A universal law in this case is exactly what it sounds like. It's universal, applies to everyone, and it would be a law that this could be done. So what I'm saying is, crudely put, here's how the test would work. If I'm willing to allow rationally, considering this in a rational manner, if I'm willing to consistently will that if I can do it, everyone else can do it. Doesn't mean they're gonna do it or have to do it, just they can do it, and I can do that consistently, my action is morally acceptable. If I can't do that, I've discovered a bad rule, a rule that shouldn't be followed, and that would make it wrong. So crudely put, for Kant, the test is this good or bad? Comes down to, would I rationally be willing to allow everyone to do this? And a critical part is, the rational part. If someone's like insane or drunk or hooked up on, meth or, Reese's peanut butter cups or something, some other terrible drug, then they could will all kinds of crazy stuff. But he's, requiring the person to be rational, blah, blah, blah. Which of course assumes a lot of stuff, well, rationality, but there you go. So how would this case work? Well, my maxim is I can lie to get money I know I can't pay back. But could I will that be a universal law? Could I imagine a world, imagine we're doing like some lame sci-fi. Imagine a world just like ours with one tweak. Because in our world, people aren't allowed to lie. Well, they're not supposed to. But imagine we take that out and we replace that with, in this world, it's just like ours, except lying is okay. Everyone can lie. There's no stigma against lying. They tell kids, lying's okay. The commandment is not, thou shalt not bear false witness. It's that false witness is fine. Go for it, kids. Lie a lot. Now, so imagine that world. Could I will both? Well, Kant says I couldn't. Why? Well, here's why. I'm lying to get money. And lying only works when what?
You lie again.
Well, yeah, one thing, good point. Yeah, if I'm a good liar. But also it only works when? Yeah, don't get caught. Part of it is, part of it clearly is being a good liar. People are bad liars. Yeah, people have to believe it. They have to believe that most people don't lie. So there's to be, lying only works and most people tell the truth and think people aren't going to lie. But you're right. Being a good liar, very important. So first thing is, be a good liar. Secondly, there has to be a general belief that people will tell the truth. But everyone knew that everyone can, if lying is just totally okay, everyone lies all the time, lying would be useless. Because people wouldn't believe anybody. You wouldn't have trust unless there was clear proof. So in that case, lying would be self-defeating. I would lie, but it wouldn't work because no one would believe me, so I can't will that it be a universal law. And so he takes that to show that it's immoral. And so roughly put, his test is, so suppose I want to do something, I would have to consider rationally, could I make this into a law for the entire world? Take the world as it is, make one change so that becomes something everyone can do. And if I can't will that, it's wrong. Now, of course, in many ways, it's kind of like the golden rule. You can only do what you can only do what you're willing to allow others to do. Now, he calls this rule-making machine by the fancy term of categorical imperative. And again, he believes that morality is a matter of law. Only rational beings can act in accord with the law based on their will, or break the law based on their will. And with other laws, like laws of gravity, etc., you don't have any choice. You just have to follow them. I mean, even when we send up rockets, we're overcoming gravity, we're still following the laws. But when it comes to moral laws, the will can choose to follow them or reject them, which will be important, as we'll see. Now, why the categorical imperative? Well, here's his answer. He thinks there are two types of imperatives. Type 1, hypothetical. These are conditional. If you want this, then do that. For example, if you want to make money, buy low, sell high. Or if you want to lose weight, exercise more, eat less. That type of stuff. The categorical imperative, though, is not hypothetical. It's not, if you want this, then do that. It's categorical. It means simply do this. It's kind of like you might have heard when politicians or celebrities do something awful, they'll categorically deny it, which means they're totally denying it. So the categorical imperative is simply do this. It's not, if you want this, do this. It's do this. So what is the categorical imperative? Well, just like the greatest happiness principle, it can be presented in one sentence, which is this. Act on the maxim whereby thou canst at the same time will the corresponding universal law. So basically it's his test. You want to do something, you go through those steps. Create maxim. Consider the maxim made into universal law. Can you rationally will and accept both? If the answer is yes, it's okay. If you can't, morally unacceptable. Now to illustrate this, and probably fill up some space in his book, he lays out 4 examples. An example is useful for a variety of things. One is illustrations showing, literally as examples showing how a theory works. Another, of course, is being paid by the word, kind of padding stuff out. Or if you wrote a paper of a certain length, examples help you pad out that word count. And it's also useful for an argument by intuition. Because, using his examples, if his theory shows, something that matches your intuitions, you would say, oh, plus for the theory. If it goes against your intuitions, of course, you'd say a minus. So what does he say about these 4 cases? Well, first one is suicide. Now, interestingly, abhorrently enough, he doesn't go through, in all these cases, the method he laid out, which is, maximum universal law type of deal. This is what he does. He sets up the following scenario. You have a person who is weary of life. They're sad and down, and they're considering offing themselves. But they have read Immanuel Kant, and they wonder, would this be the right or wrong thing to do? Now, given what he said before, you think it would be, their maximum will be if a person wants to kill themselves, they can. Universal law would be, if anybody wants to kill themselves, they can. And you have to see if there would be, if that could be willed. But Kant does something might be considered tricky, or a trick, which is this. He sets it up so the person is going to try to kill themselves out of self-love. And he says that creates the contradiction. How so? Well, a person's maxim is, out of self-love, if I grow weary of life, I'll kill myself. Universal law, out of self-love, anyone who is weary of life may kill themselves. But he says this. Self-love is supposed to do what? Get you killed or not get you killed? Yeah, not get you killed. And he says that that would be a contradiction, since self-love is supposed to be self-preservation, and so to have a person kill themselves out of self-preservation would be a contradiction. So it can't be a law of nature. And of course, critics say, hey, that's not your moral theory. And Kant says, yes, it is. So there we go. And some things it work, and some think, no, that does not work. And even though Kant, as we saw, nowhere in his theory does he lay out saying, divine command theory, religious-based ethics, you'll note, if you're familiar with like the Bible thing, that these are all things covered by the Bible. You know, suicide is right out. Lying, of course, right out. Now, we did the lying one already, and that one does seem to work, because you do the maximum universal law, they're inconsistent, seems okay. The third one is from the classic parable of the talents. In the story, you have someone who is leaving on a journey, and he gives his servants talents, a unit of money. And then the other servants go and invest it, you know, make a killing on I guess, the stock market. And he comes back, and you notice one of the servants who was given one talent has hidden it away, like under, you know, buried it or put it under, you know, a basket. And he, you know, praises the other servants for having invested wisely, but he criticizes the one servant for hiding his talents. And of course, it's a metaphor. The idea is it's wrong to not develop your talents. Now, Kant presents it the following way. We're asked to imagine a scenario where someone has got a useful talent, and they could develop it, you know, and bring about considerable good, you know, to their own benefit or the benefit of others. But they find themselves in good circumstances, so they don't really need to develop it, and so they let their talents rust. They choose not to act on it. And he makes kind of a racist comment about South Sea Islanders lolling around, you know, and drinking coconut milk, etc. Now, we can make like a modern example. Suppose you get a friend, and you know they're like, say, second year, you know, in school, and they get some real talent in, you know, engineering, in medicine, and you think, you know, they could go on to be somebody and do a lot of good in the world, and they create like a new app, you know, say like a entirely new that no one's heard before, but it's one of those, you know, it's kind of a stupid app that doesn't do anything really particularly useful, but everyone really likes it. So they become a billionaire, you know, within like a year with this useless app. And they're like, screw finishing up school, screw going to med school, I'm a billionaire. I'm going to cash this out, go to the South Sea Island, lay in a hammock, and drink coconut milk all day. And then spend a lot of time in the bathroom, because it's coconut milk. Now, would we say that that was a bad person? Well, Kant would say, yeah, they're letting their talents rust. They could do so much more good. And so it comes down to that intuition. I mean, true, there is a biblical parable against that, but do we think that that is morally wrong? Well, I might say, you know, what a waste. In the case of the billionaire, we'd probably say, yeah, it's probably okay. To use a less, you know, slightly different example, imagine someone who, and probably everyone knows someone like this, someone who is like really smart in high school, they might try college for a while, they potentially have a bright future, but then they're like, yeah, I don't really feel like doing all this stuff, and they decide to work like a part-time job, get a little money, they go and move back in their parents' basement and spend all their time playing Xbox One and smoking a lot of marijuana. And they're not hurting anybody, but they're letting all that talent rust. You know, they pay their own bills, etc., but they don't develop any skills. We might say, what a waste, but we may not think that that would be wrong with them. And so what Kant has to do is motivate why that's bad. And again, his proponents say, you know, Kant is right, and critics say he's not. Now also there's a concern about why he thinks it's wrong. And his answer is not, you know, universal law, maxim. His answer is, as a rational being, you have to develop your talents. It's just irrational not to do that. Now, I know in my own case I agree with Kant. Everyone should be all they can be. But I find myself hard-pressed to argue why that would be wrong. So I agree with him, but I have no argument for that. But, you know, Kant's a lot smarter than me, so maybe he's right. But he's also dead, so I guess I win there. Last one is, of course, the parable of the Good Samaritan. You may know the parable. There was a person who was, you know, traveling, he fell among thieves, and as thieves do, they stabbed him and took all his stuff and dumped him in a ditch. And along came someone from Samaria, a Samaritan, and found him, pulled him out of the ditch, cleaned him up, bound up his wounds, helped him back on his feet. And of course we now have the, you know, we're talking about people being good Samaritans. which was once being from a particular place, but is now a general term for someone who's helpful and kind to others. Now, in Kant's example, he asked us to imagine a person who's well off. Say the person who's the app billionaire. And they don't harm anyone else. But their view is this: I won't harm anyone else, but I shall not lift a finger to assist anyone else. So you can imagine, they're driving through town in their limo, eating their, lobster, as they're limoing, and maybe they like to drive around, look at poor people starving because it makes the lobster taste so much better. And they're not going to make people poor or hurt anybody, but they refuse to help anybody, even though they have billions of dollars and could easily help people, even at very little, overall cost to themselves. Now, Kant claims that would be wrong. Why? Well, this is how he argues. He says the person would have to do this. They would have to take the view that on some day, if they were in trouble, they would want people to help them. Suppose it turns out they get all their billions, suppose they invest all their billions in bitcoins, and then someone steals all the bitcoins. And now they've got no money, so they're totally poured out. Well, in that case, of course, they want someone to help them. So Kant says, because of that, they have to be willing to help others. Now, critics have pointed out that this doesn't seem to be, universal law maxim thing. It seems to be basically, well, I want to be helped, so I should help others. But it would seem a person can consistently say, I will help no one, and no one should help me. And there are people that actually are like that. They would not accept help from others. Most people totally would accept help, but some people can be quite consistent. And so a good question would be, not only is Kant right in terms of that we should help others, but also does this actually match his theory? Now, if you're still looking for a paper topic, these are all viable topics, namely the ethics of suicide, including things like doctor-assisted suicide, lying, of course, classic case. Are we obligated to develop our abilities? And of course, there's a myriad of cases under helping others. This can range from things like, are we obligated morally to assist, say, refugees with money or providing them with shelter? Are we obligated to assist our fellow citizens with things like welfare, Medicare, Medicaid, student loans, etc.? Or assisting people in danger, given to charity, etc. So all kinds of potential cases in there. Before pressing on to the end of Kant, anything about the stuff so far that needs more Kantian stuff?
I'm just trying to make sure I get what you're saying.
Okay.
We could write a paper saying that, okay, basically the idea is the law says there's nothing wrong with it, but morally it still could be wrong based on what you believe, right?
But which?
Oh, well, I thought it was just the whole idea.
Idea. Well, Kant's view is that suicide is wrong because of his categorical imperative. Lying is wrong because it's imperative. Letting your talents rest is wrong because it's imperative. And helping others in need is right because it was imperative. No, but you don't write about Kant, but these are all, I just threw that in as, if you're still looking for a moral case to write on, Kant's 4 examples are viable topics for the case paper. Like you could write about the ethics of suicide, or you could write about, lying, or you could write about, the ethics of not developing talents, or you could write about whether we have obligations to help others in a particular case, like are we obligated to help refugees, bring them into our country? Are we obligated to help people who are poor with things like, Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, which is one's food stamps, that type of stuff.
Okay.
So I've always just, if you're looking for a topic, there's a bunch right there.
Okay.
For free. Free topics, which are worth exactly what you pay for. Anything else? Now, Kant also addressed a rather important question, which is this. The division of stuff into the beings that count and the beings that don't. We saw in our good friend John Stuart Mill, he's very generous about the scope of morality, who counts and who doesn't. He says all human beings, and as far as the nature of things permit, all of sentient creation. So under Mill's view, anything that feels pleasure or pain matters, which is pretty generous. Kant, though, is a much narrower scope of morality. He divides reality into two categories. Category one, the best one, which fortunately we're all in, we're the best, is rational beings. Category two is everything else, what he calls objects of the inclination. And this is everything else in the universe. That would include like extra markers, folders, rocks, trees. But for Kant, it also includes animals, because he buys into the view that animals are not rational. So dogs, cats, kiwis, the fruit and the bird would all fall under there. They have no moral status of their own. So for Kant, rational beings, which is us, fortunately, we have moral status. We matter. Objects of the inclination, everything else, only has moral worth because of the worth we give it. So going back to our old definitions, rational beings, us, have intrinsic value. We're valuable in and of ourselves. Everything else has merely extrinsic value. It's valuable because we value it. So for example, my backpack has no moral status. So if someone were to set it on fire, they're not wronging the backpack, but they're wronging me because it's my backpack. Similarly, like with my husky, according to Kant, my husky has no moral status. So if someone wrongs my husky, well, they can't wrong my husky. So if someone taunts my husky or throws something at her, they're not wronging her because she has no moral status according to Kant. They're wronging me. So I give, my possessions moral, a moral umbrella. So harming them harms me. Now, as we'll see when he gets to the part on animals, Kant is nicer than his theory. Because he does think, in case you're thinking that bastard Kant, how can you not love the Huskies? Well, he does love the Huskies, because he thinks we should be kind to animals. Even though his theory says they're just objects, he's better than his theory says we should be nice to them. So, I was kind of mad at Kant at first, but he won me over with that other part. Now, why do we have value? Well, he kind of brings up an argument that we saw in Aristotle, that old, infinite regress thing. And his argument essentially is, there's got to be something that has worth intrinsically, or there'd be nothing of value. And that's got to be, for he sees it, rational beings. We give the value. Just like Coke adds life, we have value. Now, he claims, in what he calls his supreme practical principle, which is version 2 of the Categorical Imperative, that we have to treat rational nature in ourselves and as others as an end, not just a means. Roughly put, we have to treat people as having intrinsic value, ends, and not use them. So, for Kant, the second version of the Categorical Imperative, the supreme practical principle, is it's morally wrong to use rational beings just as means. Or in other words, using people just isn't wrong. Now, why? Well, his view is this. It's a matter of consistency. If I view myself as a being of worth because I'm a rational being, I have to be consistent, I have to extend the same to other people. So if I have worth because I'm a person, I have to accept that other people have worth because they're people. So, and to me that seems reasonable. If I'm valuable because I'm a person, people got to be valuable because they're people. Now, does this mean, though, that you can't ever employ people as means? So, for example, if you go to Publix and someone's bagging your groceries and ringing up your purchases, are you a bad person? And the answer is, for Kant, no. Because as long as you're treating them not just as a means, so you have to still respect them as an end. So the next time you're buying groceries, you should always tell the person, even though you're bagging my groceries, I respect you as a fellow rational being who has moral worth. So having someone bag your groceries is okay. Shanking them and stealing their kidney, not okay, because you treat them just as a means. So normal stuff, like employing people. You suppose you're a business owner, you're hiring people to work for you. As long as you still respect them as beings of moral worth, that's okay. But if you treat them very badly and treat them as things, then Kant's got a moral problem there. So again, his view is not that you can't use people as means, it's that you can't treat them just as means. So, gotta be nice. Which, you know, is something we recognize in our own case, because none of us, in our own case, want to be treated as things. We want to be treated as people. And to be consistent, we gotta do the same thing for other people. Now, a good question is, where do these laws that Kant talks about, where do they come from? Well, as Kant sees it, all of us are members of a kingdom, a magical kingdom. No, not Disney, but the kingdom of ants, which has no rights. It's kind of boring. But we're all citizens of this kingdom. How so? Well, we're the lawmakers. We're the legislators. Why? Well, this is what he claims. If the law is imposed from the outside, then we're not engaged in acting wrongly or rightly, because we're just being imposed upon in terms of morality. If we're acting just by our own desires, we're also not acting morally or immorally. What we have to do is we have to create the laws and choose to follow them or break them. So there's two key components. The moral rule has to come from us. We have to be autonomous. Because otherwise we're just, we're like puppets. So we have no moral, we're not creating the rules. The second part is we have to have the capacity to will or not will them. Because otherwise we'd just be literal puppets. And so we are the lawmakers of the kingdom of ends. Or so he claims. Now this ties into his famous 3 postulates of morality. One interesting or perhaps cheating way that Kant argues for stuff is he says that there are some things we can't prove. They're unprovable. But we really, really want them. And if we can show that, something we really want and need requires them, then we can take that as a reason to accept them. And for Kant, these include famously freedom, immortality, and God. Why do we need these? Well, for Kant, we have to, even though we can't prove freedom, Kant believed he was doing his Kant thing during the time when Newtonian physics was all the rage. And Kant believed that science tells us that there is no free will, which is something people often still say today. There's no free choice. So Kant says science says there's no freedom, but we have to accept freedom. Why? Well, because there's no morality without freedom, and we really, really, really want morality. How so? Well, I'll use a crappy illustration. Suppose someone's walking by, and lightning hits a lamppost and it falls over and crushes somebody. Do we say the lamppost was evil, or the lightning was evil?
Most people say because they were bad, so that's what.
Maybe they were bad. They deserve that. They deserve getting whomped by the lamppost. But in general, we'd say maybe the person was bad, but we'd say the lamppost is not evil. We wouldn't arrest it. We wouldn't, they would be over here, cuffing and hauling it off to court. But if someone was standing here, watched me go by the lamppost and pushed the button, and made the lamppost, flip over and crush them, we'd say that was bad because the person we think they had a choice. So we believe that morality requires that people be able to choose. Or to use like a less stupid example, if you're driving and someone just runs out in front of you, you slam on the brakes and you hit them, and they're down, you're not charged in any sensible court with murder because there's nothing you can do. Now, if someone goes up on the sidewalk after someone, which has happened to me. One time I was running, for real, first time I was running the cross-country coach, and someone came up on the sidewalk after us with a car, for real. I've actually been, yeah, at least, before I went to school, someone else killed me with a car, intentionally, to try to just ram me in my bike and just knock me off, and just old people from Ohio, for real. And I went to Ohio when someone tried to kill me in the cross-country coach by coming up on the sidewalk. I've had a lot of near-death auto experiences. I mean, cars have come the closest to killing me of anything. I do not like cars, because people are always trying to kill me. I don't like people either, because they're always trying to kill me. But yeah, so if someone comes on the sidewalk and tries to run you over, we think they have a choice. So if they were to hit me, we would say they were responsible. So Kant seems to be right. We think that to say people ought to do something means they're free to do it or not. Which is why we don't arrest trees or cars, but we do, condemn people. The second is immortality. And you may think like, oh, what? What does this have to do with morality? I mean, immortality would be cool, but what does it have to do with morality? Well, if you recall when we started this section, I mentioned that a moral theory has to be practical. The average person has to be able to meet the conditions of the theory. And Kant claims that we have to achieve moral perfection. Now, how long would it take to become perfect at something? Forever. You need an infinite amount of time. And weirdly, Kant says, well, you gotta be morally perfect, and it would be unreasonable to require something impossible, so you've got to be immortal. We've got to be able to practice forever to get it perfect. And so we've got to have immortality, or so he claims. Thirdly, you've got to have God. Why? Well, he doesn't say, he explicitly argues against this. God is not a reason to be good. Because if people are good because or if the people act good, or what they think is good, to be rewarded, to avoid punishments, they're not really being good. They're being practical. So if someone says, I don't want to go to hell, I want to go to heaven, so I'll follow the rules, they're just being self-interested. They're being selfish. They're not really being good. It would be like someone saying, yeah, I'm doing this to avoid getting, punched. You wouldn't say, oh, what a good person. You'd say, yeah, I guess that's kind of smart. So what does God do? Well, as we saw before, God's job is to solve the following problem. We want our moral, craving for justice requires that the good be rewarded and the bad be punished. But when we wonder about the world, we see the evil often triumph and the good often end in disaster. So we need cosmic justice. So morality, in our thirst for justice, requires God to satisfy that. Because we don't get justice here, so we need, in order to have a just universe, there's got to be God laying down the justice in the afterlife. Or so he claims.
Wait, what?
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, because Kant claims, he could be wrong with this, he says that we want justice, and that we think that in order to have a morality mean anything, that being good must result in happiness, and the wicked must be brought to task, must be punished. Otherwise, the universe is unjust. But we don't get justice here, typically. And the wicked are often triumph, the good often suffer. So for that craving for justice to be satisfied, there's got to be a being that sets it all right. That even though the person dies, who's wicked with all kinds of money, that God says, Judgment Day, sucker, going to hell. Pow. Or the other person who dies in poverty who is good, they get rewarded. Now, of course, Kant could be wrong about this. Maybe we don't care about that, but that's what he claims.
Gotcha.
In our remaining minute, some problems for Kant. Now, Kant lays out this idea of duty. And one problem people bring forth about this is, we normally think of duty as an obligation to a particular thing. Like you have a duty to your spouse when you're married, or a duty to your country when you become like a member of the military. But in Kant, people raise the question, well, what is the duty to? What does that mean? And of course, people like Kant can come up with a response to that, explain that. Now, another problem people bring up is the absolutism. As I mentioned back in the ancient days in part one appeal of Kant's theory is absolutism, no exceptions. But as we saw, people often do want exceptions, so the absolutism is often unappealing. Thirdly, people who want to ascribe moral worth to things that aren't rational raise the concern that why take rationality to be what matters? Why not, like Mill did, pleasure and pain? Fourthly, there do seem to be some terrible maxims that can pass Kant's test, that someone could rationally universalize. And the final problem is, kingdom of n seems pretty vague. So that brings us to the end of the stuff. Again, be sure to complete exam 1, quizzes part 2 by October 16th, Friday, and because of the homecoming festivities, we won't have normal class. So you can use that time to do the stuff, or do stuff that's more fun, which may involve free food. Because we all agree that free is good.